Hello, I'm your host, Giselle Gamby, and this is the Intuitive Pull Podcast, where together we'll embrace the plans we did not make yet, unfold businesses and lives that are so much greater in wealth in all ways than any business or life plan could ever achieve. My wish is that you make intuition your most trusted advisor. So buckle up, get present, and let's go. So I'm really, really grateful to have two men who I know in my life on this episode this morning. Scott Osborne. So Scott and I have a funny story how we met. We met, I don't know if you remember, Scott, but we met early 2000s. I was on a blind date. I was waiting at a pub in North Sydney for this blind date. And you and Sky turned up, and I knew Sky because I had just employed her at the Sheraton Sydney Airport Hotel.
Look, yeah, I do remember that sort of vaguely. It was a big night, but yeah, yeah. Look, friendship certainly goes back a long way, right?
It does. So, yes, certainly not in the style of where we're going to go, but yes, we have partied very, very hard in the earlier days. I think we've grown up a little bit more in the recent.
I kind of feel like we ticked that box, confidently.
Oh, we did that really, really, really well. Like, A+. We don't need any improvement in that department. So I'm best friends with Scott's wife, Sky, and I know Paul Dunn. So Scott Osborne and Paul Dunn. I know Paul Dunn because Paul is married to Scott's sister, and we too have partied hard in the old days. It's an unfortunate reason that we're here on this episode this morning. Paul's brother took his life on the 17th of June 2021, and since then they have created a foundation called Spoke to a Bloke. And you had your launch when I was facilitating a retreat in Kenya, and I was over there thinking, bloody hell, I wish that I could have been in Sydney to attend the launch. And then I had the intuitive pull, well, how can I support? And I thought, well, the podcast does some really good things that I could never anticipate. Absolutely, the intention of this podcast is to bring more love into the world. And so I thought maybe I can support by interviewing the two of you. And so I reached out to Scott and put it to him, and not knowing what your response was going to be because it's very raw. It's not that long ago. And Paul, your next brother, and both of you came back and, bravely said, yes, you're happy to be interviewed. So.
Yeah. And Giselle, thank you. Thank you for having us on. It's awesome. Yes, it was through tragedy that we kind of started this. We had no idea what we got into when we started this charity. But the overwhelming support, the enthusiasm, just how common this issue is, it's really kind of blown not just Scott and me, but my other brother, Adi, Matt and Kenny, who are involved in the charity as well. It's really blown our minds, around how important this issue is. And we're just trying to do our bit, right? And having fun along the way.
Yeah, thank you. So we're going to dive more deeply into that in a moment. I just wanted to say I went for a run yesterday afternoon and I was feeling into this episode, and I really have an intention that this is in honor of Nick. I had his smile. He had the biggest smile. I had his face with me all through that run yesterday afternoon. And I remember actually we had a bit in common because you guys ran the Sydney half marathon a while ago now, probably 4 or 5 years ago, as I was, and he and I would be messing each other, being competitive about, how many kilometers have you run this week and what was your pace and blah, blah, blah. So it was interesting that he came to me and as I was running yesterday. And so this is in honor of Nick. This is in honor of his immediate family. This is in honor of your families. And, may this episode literally save lives. May it literally save lives. And may it create healing in your families and in many, many other families. So that's my intention. So as we begin, can you describe Nick up until the time that he took his life? How would you have described Nick? What was your impression of Nick? And this is to both of you.
Yeah, for me, I'll take it. He was my older brother, right? So absolute role model as far as the kind of guy I always looked up to, the guy I always went to. We used to work together right up until the 17th of June 2021. So we used to talk probably 3 or 4 times a day.
Wow.
About everything, about work, about family, about life, about goals. For me personally, he was more than a brother. He was really, truly just a legend of a guy and such a great mate from my perspective. Yeah. We work for a small startup called RenewTrack. So there's the plug for RenewTrack, but he was the CFO and I was the Chief Customer Officer, the CCO. So we both had a lead management role in that organization and therefore worked, really closely together every day.
Thank you. Thank you. And what about you, Scott? Being brother-in-law of Nick, how would you have defined Nick up until the time he passed?
Look, it's an interesting one. I think, how far would I go? How far would you like me to go back?
Wherever you feel to
Wherever
go.
suits.
Wherever
Yeah,
you
I mean,
feel.
look, if I was going to look at the couple of years beforehand and what I noticed and my experience of him, I think, he was certainly what I'd call a best mate and a brother for myself. And I really noticed a change in him over time. And it really started, we used to work out a lot together. So we'd go to the gym, we were training for a triathlon that never actually happened, but boy, we trained for it really hard. And Paulie was there and there was the 3 of us, right? And throughout that time period, he was, I'd say, the most alive I've seen him. He was very centered. He was happy. He was, Nick, awesome human being. But, what I did notice is when he stopped training for a bit there with us and he started sort of doing his own thing, and I just sort of noticed a bit of a drop in energy from him. Probably leading up to it, the date, I think, the reality is I felt that he was not lost himself, but he wasn't in the moment. He wasn't really present. It's almost like, he just wasn't there really. And I think it was just so much going on for him internally that to be present would have been so difficult. And I think, and challenging. And there was a couple of times there where I had conversations with him, one in particular where he fully broke down. And, it was unexpected. There was something there, but it was unexpected for me. But I think after that, I sort of checked in with him the next day and it was fobbed off as if, look, I feel better now. I've shared the problems and I'm good to go. And so, for me, what was it like to be with Nick over that last sort of couple of years it was an ever-changing scenario, but yeah, that's sort of a brief summary.
And did you ever think that he would take his life?
Never in a million years. I mean, look, it was just no way. I mean, look, I know Paulie would attest to this, but the reality is it came as a huge shock. And I mean, there was no inkling from my side, really at all. Yeah, he was going through some stuff, it felt like. Was he sharing? Not really, as much as I would have liked him to, but never would have thought it would have ended like that.
Yeah.
And I think, Giselle, just to add to that, I mean, it was really interesting when I had to make phone calls to people on the 17th, the 18th, the 19th, the month later, 6 months later, when people are hearing for the first time, the absolute feedback was nothing but shock. And I know there's always shock, right? So it's always a shock if someone takes their life, but probably more so than I'd realised, just people going, like, Nick, are you kidding me? He was always the guy to reach out to everyone else and make sure everyone else was okay. And, stories from, a guy from my work who didn't really know Nick that well, but, worked with him and knew him kind of. And his story to me was, one day Nick just turned up at 3 o'clock on a Thursday and dropped a carton of beer off on his doorstep. And Keith's like, what's that for? And he goes, I was just thinking about you and just wanted to make sure you had a good day and had some beers over the weekend. And stories like that, you just kind of go, mate, he was a great guy.
Mm. Yes. And so Scott had some experience with Nick when Nick wasn't feeling so great. What about you? Because you said, you spoke 3 or 4 times a day. You worked every day together with each other and your brothers. Did you see that side of him?
To repeat Scott, not in a million years, right? We would often talk about work. There's definitely stresses involved in that, but we would help each other through it. We would talk about other stuff that was going on. We used to joke that, we'd have a down day and we'd call it our man periods. So we'd be like, oh, I've got my man periods today. And we would like check in with each other during that day and help each other. And it was typically once a month.
Yeah.
Where we would like reach out and we'd have a joke about it.
Yeah.
But the thing that just like Nick loved an activity, an event, something that was happening.
Mm.
And the thing that I still don't understand to this day was literally the following weekend, him and I were due to fly up to Queensland. We were going to a good mate, Andy Barry. We were going to his 50th. We had tickets to the State of Origin. And literally the week of the 17th of June, we were talking about it. We were talking about the flight, getting to the airport. And for them to hear what happened on the Wednesday, it really didn't make sense at all. And
what about now? Does it make more sense? Do you have some kind of semblance as to
what I guess makes sense to me now is just how it can impact anyone.
Yeah.
And mental health is a real issue. I didn't appreciate it at all, just about. And, Paul Green's another great example, right, which most of your listeners in Australia will have heard of. Tragic story where people close to him had no real understanding of the challenges he was facing and thought he was from the outside, a happy guy, great family, right leading up to when he took his own life as well. So I guess the impact, the fact that it can, affect anyone is definitely something I'm learning and hence the charity and what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
The thing that makes me sad is that he just didn't reach out that one last time for that last phone call where maybe Scott, myself, whoever, we could have just stopped what happened. That's the bit that makes me sad. Will he have still been down? Will he still have potentially been depressed? Yes, because we're learning that now.
Yeah.
But just that one last phone call could have made that difference, right?
Hence the name of I've got shivers everywhere, just have to say. Hence the name of your foundation, Spoke. If only he'd spoken to a bloke. If only he had that one last chance to speak to a bloke. Hence the name of your foundation. I get it.
Yeah, I think, the thing is, Giselle, in hindsight, it is the saddest thing is that, he didn't feel he could fully share what was going on for him.
Mm.
And he felt potentially, I don't know if the word's embarrassed. He didn't feel that he could be vulnerable. He felt maybe pegged in by society's view of what man should be. It's hard to know, but the one thing that's true that cuts through it all is he just didn't feel comfortable or didn't feel like he could share. And it's hard. It's hard when you look back on it because you do think, well, could we have done more to help him through that? But at the same time, people are only going to do what they can do. So it's just what it is. But that's my thoughts on it in terms of
Yeah. Well said. Well said. And how has it impacted each of you and your families?
For me, it's brought a lot of people, I think, closer together. And this charity has been personally amazing because we're not the experts in mental health. We never probably will be, but we believe that we can do something and we can do a small part in just helping, raise awareness. And, if we can save one Nick, everyone has their own Nick story, whether it's themselves, if it's a brother or dad or whoever it may be, if we can just help one person, to me, that's massive, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And the reason why I felt to interview you guys, because who knows, there could be one Nick out there, there could be many Nicks out there. There's magic that could happen from us coming together today, and that's absolutely the intention that I'm holding.
Yeah, but and to answer your question, you know, how has it impacted the family? In all honesty, I think the kids have found it really hard. When I was growing up, suicide wasn't even a word. You know, I'd maybe heard of one person through a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend, but it's really sad just how common it is today, and the fact that it is even an option for people and they're aware of it as an option. That's the bit that is, I guess it's scary, right? And therefore, for me personally, it's how do I get a better appreciation of how to look for signs, how to be a better listener, how to have real conversations with people, and to Scott's point, not just gloss over it and think everything's okay. Like, you know, probably that is the piece I think has been the good to come out of this terrible event.
Yeah, absolutely. So I can imagine you're that with your boys and your daughter.
Yeah, try to be, and the whole family, I think, has really pulled together, which has been really lovely.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Thanks. What about you, Scott? How has Nick's suicide impacted you and your family?
Oh, look, it's devastating, to say the least. When it happened, I mean, what Paulie said there about the kids being affected, like my daughter Sienna is, there is that thing in the back of my mind now when I'm out and about, is Dad okay? And she does still miss Nick. She still talks about Nick. She did a dedicated dance to Nick just recently, which is really nice. And we've got Nick's photo on our pinboard at home as a family. So every day we get up, every time we're in the kitchen, it's right there. And it's a good reminder, I think. And it's affected everyone to a point where I think it does make you feel, all the little things that you worry about in terms of relationships and things. It does make you bring you more to a point where you're sort of happy to forgive and forget, and you move on, because life is short and anything can happen. And let's make sure that we make the most of the relationships that we do have. I think, and for me personally, it's shone a light on, am I doing what I would have loved to see Nick do, in those late days, because, being comfortable and being vulnerable is really difficult, I've found. And the reality is that it really helps. And I think for me, it's been a bit of a personal wake-up call in a lot of respects. But yeah, look, overall, there's been so many, I wouldn't call it negative, but there've been so many parts that have been really sad. But out of that, sort of the phoenix comes the good parts, right? And you start to appreciate that. And it's almost like, I hate to say it, sometimes, every now and again, in fleeting moments, it feels like he always wanted to give a lot to everyone. It's almost like that was his last gift.
Scott and Paul, when I was running yesterday, that's what I was sensing. And I was a little bit fearful of saying that to you. And you've said it.
Yeah. And then the irony is, right, there's no one in the world that loved an event more than Nick. And Scott and I used to joke that when he used to get excited, he used to sit there and flap his arms like a bloody chicken. And it was just his way, that he was so excited about something. And so we joke about it now, like whenever we're doing something or we're talking about an event, Scott and I look at each other, and Matt as well, and Adi, and we go, oh man, Nick would be flapping his arms right now.
Yeah.
he would love it. He would love Spoke to a Bloke. He would love the events. He would love 100% being part of it. So, you know, in some way, I hope he's looking down and with a big smile on his face, as you said at the beginning, proud of what we're doing.
Yeah, I'm sure he is. Again, that's what I was sensing yesterday. And as I said, I was a little bit fearful of saying that because, you know, you guys could have told me to fuck off.
We would never do that, Giselle.
Oh, you could have. It's a pretty big statement, isn't it? To say
I think
that this was his final gift, and it's a big gift. Like the impact that this has, Spoke to a Bloke, the impact that Spoke to a Bloke can have is huge.
Well, that's right, and it's you know, it's sweet and sour, right? It's kind of like it's bittersweet or whatever you want to call it, whatever that analogy is.
Yeah,
I can't quite place it, but you know, the thing is, there is that dynamic, and there's the sadness and then the you know what's happening now, and yeah, is amazing, really.
So it's like there's a statement that's going on in my head right now. It's like there's like life can actually come from death. And ultimately, isn't that the intention of Spoke to a Bloke? Not words that you would have ever used, I'm sure. But life can come from death.
Yeah, certainly it can have some big ramifications in a really positive way, right? Because, you know, it's interesting because when we started the first Nick's Walk, for instance, and you talk about life coming from death, it was something that I think, Paulie, you'd agree with me on this, it wasn't a choice. It wasn't something that we were kind of contemplating, do we do this? It was something that we were, not a calling, but it was something that we knew that we had to do.
I read your piece on your website and it said it wasn't a choice. It was basically an intuitive pull.
Yeah, it was something that, you know, there was never a choice or a question, are we going to do it? It's just when and how. And, you know, that came up pretty early in the piece. And I think what's been interesting is, you know, you look at the sad parts, but then you do look at the what comes out of it from a positive perspective. And, you know, there's so many things. The reality is that, you know, Spoke to a Bloke was formed, Nick's Walk. We feel we hope we've helped some bloke out there through what we've been doing to date. I think, you know, family relationships have gotten better with the brothers, which has been fantastic. And that's been an amazing experience as well. So, you know, and you grow as a person. So I think there's plenty of good that comes from it. Yeah.
So tell us, the moment that you guys decided, what was that moment that you guys decided to create this foundation? Tell us about that.
Probably the 17th of June today. It wouldn't have been straight away. It all started from, we used to do this walk with Nick from Spitbridge to Watson's Bay. It started with 4 of us, then it went to 6 of us. And Nick kind of was the instigator of that walk. And it was, hey boys, I just want to hang out and just talk and just have some fun. And like, in all honesty, I can say that's how this whole charity started. And when the funeral was on, it was in the middle of COVID, right? So there was a lot of people that couldn't be at the funeral. And even those that were at the funeral, it was kind of weird, right? We had people in different rooms, and I mean, you were there, right?
Yeah, I was on Zoom, online, whatever it was.
People in different rooms, and it just wasn't the send-off that we wanted to give him.
Yeah.
So probably a week later, we thought, well, what better way to do it than let's bloody do Nick's Walk again and do it in his memory. And, you know, had an amazing day, an amazing event, had, you know, 110 people do it, amazing feedback. And I think for me personally, I don't know about you, Scotty, but for me, it was at that point where I went, okay, A, this has to be an annual event. And then B, what else can we do? Because that was freaking awesome. And why can't we? This is what we're good at. Or we can run events. So why not do more? And Spoke to a Bloke, you know, was really formed out of that.
Yeah, amazing. And as you said, Nick loved events. So how perfect. So tell us about what's coming up with Spoke to a Bloke.
So we've got, so the next event is Nick's Walk, obviously, that we've got coming up. So that's on February 4 in Sydney. So we'll walk from Spitbridge to the Watson's Bay Hotel is where we finish. So yeah, I mean, that's the next event. We're hoping that we can have as many blokes along. One thing we do know is that it's all shapes and sizes, right? So we've got kids coming, sons coming, we've got uncles, we've got, you name it, grandpas, we've got dads. And the one thing that we know about this walk is it's a fantastic scenic walk, which is great. And you've got the 25-kilometre walk component to it. But it's interesting what happens when you walk and talk. You know, you've got time to share and you do connect with other blokes and the guys, you know, and it's a real, you know, it's quite a fulfilling sort of time, and you come out from at the other end, you feel really good physically, but more importantly, you feel like you've had a pretty kind of good chat with quite a few blokes. We end up at Watson's Bay Hotel and we finished with a big barbecue there, and then back to Manly on a ferry. So it's great. We've got Brisbane coming up as well, which I'll let Paulie talk to you about.
Yeah, and so you know us, Giselle, we don't just stop at one walk. We wanted to do more. So we've got Adelaide lined up for February 25th. And we've got Brisbane scheduled for April the 29th. We're partnering with Cameron Daddo and My Men's Team, which is the charity we're donating funds to. And he's been absolutely awesome. It's great to have him on board and really driving that. And already having discussions to have a walk later in the year, probably October, November in Perth and potentially Townsville as well. So that's kind of next year. And then there's a few other fun events that we're looking to do. One's called the Headband Challenge, which on our socials, we'll start promoting that early next year. And then a couple of other things we want to do around Father's Day, potentially something involving a barbecue of some description, charity auctions, you know, lots and lots of stuff we want to do.
So this was definitely the plan that you didn't make, right? Definitely the plan that you didn't make. Yet there's leadership that's being born through each of you. And I know that there are more members, you know, to the foundation. There are more blokes part of your team, but with you two sitting in front of me, like there's different expressions of leadership that's being born through this.
Yeah, it's been funny. It's been good. Like we all bring something different, which is awesome. Scott and I drive each other mad. But it's a good mad, you know. I'm loving actually getting to know the guys, not just on a family social basis, but also just how they operate and how to make something really solid that can grow, getting it done right. I'm probably a little bit let's go, but it's good. I think we really complement each other, and it's been fun.
Yeah, awesome. So I'll put details of those walks and the dates and everything in the show notes, so anybody can join, right? It's not just the family and friends, it's anyone, right? You're opening your arms and welcoming in as many blokes to attend.
Yeah, that's right. And you know, just to be transparent, we've had a few people say, you know, can ladies or daughters do it as well? And it's been really tough because Nick was definitely not exclusive in any way. He would always include everyone. But I guess the unanimous feedback we've had is the benefit of doing the walk for blokes with just blokes.
Yeah.
Is really important. And we've been encouraged by everyone to kind of really stick to that.
Yeah.
So for now, yes, it's blokes only, but there are definitely other things we're planning that can involve everyone, because, you know, something like Nick's tragedy, it impacts everyone, you know, daughters, grandmothers, neighbors, sisters, colleagues. So yeah, we will definitely look to do things that include everyone as well.
What's the most surprising thing that's come out of Nick's tragedy, do you feel?
That's a big question. I mean, I think there's a few things. It's hard to put it on one, if that makes sense. I think I thought we would have done something around an event. That's great, but I would never have thought we would have gone as far as to, you know, register a charity called Spoke to a Bloke and make that the vehicle to support men's mental health. I think in saying that, one thing that has been really surprising, and I don't know if this is on point to your question, but we often wear our T-shirts, Spoke to a Bloke out, when we're out and about socially. And I think, you know, whether we're together or separate, the amount of blokes that are coming up to us and saying it's really important what you're doing, and also having some pretty deep conversations with us has probably been one of the most surprising things for me.
Amazing.
I just wouldn't have expected that, a T-shirt, on the back of our T-shirt, it says supporting men's mental health. On the front, it's spoke to a bloke. And that's it. There isn't anything more. There's no website directory. There's no additional information, but it's definitely striking a chord in a lot of guys, because we had, I was down at a rock concert in Wollongong recently, and I was just lined up, and a guy came over to me and wanted to talk to me about FIFO, fly in, fly out, and that, men's mental health is a real issue over there. And I spent about half an hour with him, and I don't think that I've fixed anything. I don't think that that interaction necessarily gave him any tools, but it gave him an opportunity to share it and, and speak to someone. And the reality is, this is something that's consistent. So I don't know that I put on this T-shirt and there's ever been a time where someone hasn't said something. And so that's been, whilst it hasn't been the most surprising thing from losing Nick, it certainly is something that's been really interesting and surprising as far as what's come from that, being spoke to a bloke, and what that's meant and rolled out like.
I just love it, right? Because what you're saying is that it doesn't just, spoke to a bloke just doesn't happen every year at Nick's Walk, just once a year, or when you do other events. It's actually every day. And when you put that T-shirt on, like the name is just so perfect. I don't know who came up with the name, but it's just so bloody perfect, because the solution's inherent in the name of your charity.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, look, when we were talking about and we were spitballing names, the big thing was we definitely wanted to have communication in there, right? Because we knew that was a big part of it. That's what we wanted to be about. And so, yeah, look, it's rolled out in a very interesting way. And as you said, it's unplanned. And realistically, we don't know what's next.
Yeah.
But it's been a really interesting ride to date, that's for sure.
That's awesome.
And I think, Giselle, just from my perspective, probably the biggest thing I've learned is it can actually happen to anyone. And I know that's it's easy to say, but this is a classic example of that. Probably the other one is, it's not just about the person that's struggling. It's also, it's been beneficial for me, for Scott. How do people that have someone close to them that has done this or is struggling, how do you deal with it yourselves, and how can you be a better listener? So, yes, our shirt says spoke to a bloke, but one of our ambassadors, he was kind of saying, I love the logo, but spoke to a bloke, so what? It's about, did you listen, and did you hear what they were saying, and did you get back to them and follow up and put an arm around them and make sure they're okay? So I thought that was really good. And then probably finally the other one for me that has been so exciting about what we're doing is just the absolute passion people have to help and to get involved and to see what they can do and share their story. That's been tremendous. It's been brilliant. Amazing.
As I said, life can come from death. Yeah, life can come from death. It's beautiful. And definitely Nick's gift. Yeah, Nick's gift. I've got.
That sounds like the name of a horse race. We should have a horse race annually called the Nick's Gift.
Oh, that's so good.
They were always thinking.
See, there you go. You don't know what's next until it comes. I love that. There you go. I love that. Perfect. So I think I've got two more questions. So I want to give you both, and both of you might respond. None of you might respond. One of you might respond. I don't know how this question's going to go. About your own mental health. So we've talked about men's mental health. We've talked about Nick's mental health. What about your own mental health? Like, what's your journey been like? Not necessarily to do with your mental health since the 17th of June, but your mental health. And the reason why I'm asking this question is because I'm giving you, if it's appropriate, the opportunity, to be a role model here and, to be vulnerable about your own possible challenges.
Look, what I would say is I'm certainly no stranger to having challenges like every bloke. And the reality is I've gone through a number of different times where it's, and even to this day, right, it's no one's stranger to going through bouts of depression or, having more challenging times. I've been through personally I was probably, in a depressed state for probably 12 months, many years ago. And that was on the back of losing a business, house, and, everything that goes along with that, right? And it all happened at once. And, what's interesting is back then I had no idea what was happening to me. I had zero understanding. All I knew was I had to fight it. And that didn't work. And there was all these things that happened along the way. And I think back to that and I'm like, well, that probably started my personal journey on really understanding myself more and understanding how to deal with things. But yeah, look, that was probably the start of it for me. And I think the reality is you learn how you get through these things, right? So for me, how I did that was, you certainly seek out the right people to speak to. And I think, Giselle, you actually way back when recommended someone for me to speak to via Skysy. And, and I mixed that with some exercise and good people around me. And once I actually sort of understood what was happening, it was a lot easier to then, it's like calling it what it is and then being able to, you accept that and you can move forward. But look, that was one time, and that was probably that was something that stands out for me in terms of now. Look, I just think it's for me anyway, there's always challenges that come along. I just feel like I'm better equipped to deal with it. And, it's something that you continually work on for sure, because, self-work is so important. But I think it's also the reminder of what happened with Nick. Like, nothing, share it if you need to. Like, nothing is that bad. And, if you do practice what we preach and we do share and we do talk about what's going on, I think it's, for me anyway, it helps. And, I'm good, but, from time to time, there's still those challenges. So yeah, that's what I would share with you.
We're human, right?
Yeah.
We're human. And self-awareness is everything. Now, I remember in 2013, my business was not doing well at all. And, Clayton was like, the ship is sinking at home here financially. And I felt so hopeless and helpless. And I'd spent all this money on experts to help me and nothing helped. And then I had a coach who I just met on Facebook. She lived in New Zealand. She reached out to me and she said, "Are you all right?" She just must have sensed. And I said, "No, not really." She said, "Oh, let's get on a call." And I, shared with her what had been happening. And she said to me, "Oh, you're in chaos." And do you know how relieving it was to hear that I was in chaos? Like, I could actually, I had a context. And it allowed me to accept that I was in chaos, which actually gave me peace, which is kind of bizarre, right? And then, of course, that, I started working with her and everything changed. So yes, absolutely. Awareness is just everything, rather than being completely in it and not understanding where you're at and what's going on. So thank you. Thanks, Scott, for being open about that. I really appreciate that. So I was thinking yesterday, again, when I was running, I was thinking, the way that Nick took his life was, there was no going back. The way he did it was final. What do you think, if you could have got into his head at that time, what do you think he would have been thinking once he took that final act of no going back?
Paulie, do you want to go with this? Or
yeah, it's because I've had this unanswered question a billion times, honestly. I don't know what he was thinking, other than he wasn't thinking. And there would have been 1,000 people that would have ran to be by his side and helped him. We would have dropped everything. So what was he thinking? I think he wasn't thinking because back to what I said earlier in the the discussion was, I just wish there was that one last chance to have a conversation, because I actually think we could have snapped him out of it.
Mm.
I really do. I hope we could have. I just think he got to the point where there just was no other option, and I just think he must have felt that it was the best outcome for everyone in him doing what he's doing, which again it makes zero sense to me, because how is that a good outcome for anyone, right? And
well,
yeah.
I've had that same thought, right? Like, there's been a few female suicides in the area in the last few years. And I'll be the first to admit that my first thought goes, how selfish can they be to their children? When I was facilitating a retreat in Croatia in September, there was a powerful, powerful, most loving, gorgeous woman there. I actually interviewed her on the episode, Fuck Yes, I Matter and So Do You, is the name of the episode. And she'd been there. And she said, people say that, how can you be so selfish? And when they're in that space, they think that they're actually doing the right thing, that they're helping. Like this, their sense of worth is so at the rock bottom. It's so rock bottom that they think that they're doing their families a favor for not being there anymore. That's just, thankfully, I've never been at that level. I don't understand that personally, but hearing that from Libby was it opened me up to be able to see just how low their self-worth is in that moment. Yeah,
and that's probably, there's been a lot of learning, and we'll continue to learn every single day as part of our path forward now. But just being aware that when someone gets into that, they call it the red zone, when they're in the red zone, what are the strategies that they can adopt to kind of help them through that? And for someone like Nick, that day, that minute, that second, that hour, if he had had an awareness of, shit, I'm in the red and I need to do something quickly, whether it's, jumping on the ground and doing 50 push-ups, or, grabbing some ice cubes, and there's all these different techniques that people have, that could have made a difference, right? And I had a good friend the other day said that his email to me was, spoke to a bloke, is absolutely such a perfect time for this to be coming forward, because he had just spent an hour and a half on the phone with one of his mates that was about to kill himself, and he spent 90 minutes on the phone with this guy, convincing him to stay alive. They were both in tears. Obviously, it was a very emotional phone call, interstate, so they couldn't be there physically together. And, he was just saying how, spoke to a bloke, if we can just make people aware that there will be times where you could be in that red zone, and this is what you need to do to get out of it, that could be massive, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't even know about that. I've learned something just from your sharing there. So thank you. As I'm sure the listeners will have learned as well. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks for saying that.
I think, Giselle, like if I was going to comment on what I think Nick was sort of thinking beforehand, I would definitely agree with Paul. And I think the simplest way the way I would encapsulate it is there's just no way forward for him. He can't see a way forward that actually makes sense, or it can't happen. He can't see it. This is all it is. And that the world will be a better place if he wasn't here, unfortunately. And that's all I can gather. And it's just so sad to think that he was at that depth of sadness. And that's all I can, sort of string together that he may have thought beforehand. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny, Giselle, there's this, I'd never heard of the term called misadventure. I'm not sure if you've heard of that or your listeners have, but we learned about that the day after, and Scott and I and Matt and Adi and a few others, we were convinced that this was a misadventure and it was an accident and he hadn't meant to do what he did, and it wasn't suicide. I was 100% around that. And kind of put me at ease going, well, it's a tragedy still, but it's a misadventure. So it's kind of easier to take. When we found out it wasn't, and it was actually suicide, it completely changed everything, because then it was, fuck, you know, why, how. I felt guilty. I'm sure Scott felt guilty. All of us, there was a level of guilt, blame, anger, sadness. You just go round and around and around. And, you know, am I through it today? No. I went for a walk 3 days ago and I was just listening to music and just burst into tears walking home. Didn't know what it came from, just came out of the blue. But it was good because I could go home and talk about it. You know, got together the next day with Matt and Scotty, and it's good. It's good to have that network of support.
And you even let yourself, I know that it feels like that you couldn't have held it in if you tried, but perhaps you've learnt from Nick that it's really important to feel what's ever there, and you allowed yourself to feel that.
Yeah, and no shame in that too. I'm you know, I love a good cry.
Yeah.
I'll let it happen. Yeah, no issue with that. But it's it definitely gets easier for sure. But the passion to do something with this charity is just getting stronger and stronger and stronger, because it could just help one more Nick, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Many more.
Yeah.
Really acknowledging, the passion and the ever-growing passion, really acknowledging that there's a force here. That's what I'm feeling sitting here with you two. There's a force here. Yeah, unstoppable. Like it's not like as if you guys are going to drop this, you know, because you're too busy in 6 months. Right? There's a force here. And you don't know how big the force is going to be, but it's got a life of its own. It's like there's an inevitability here. Especially, you know, knowing how and who, you know, each of you are. Like you guys are bloody powerful men. Powerful men. Powerfully loving men. Yeah, powerfully loving men. So really acknowledging you.
I think that's a great word. It's inevitable. For me, sums it up. It's not a choice.
You know, and the name of this podcast is The Intuitive Pull. I mean, that's exactly what's going on here. You guys are pulled. There's no choice. You're pulled and you're going with it.
Yeah, 100%.
So thanks to both of you for being here. You know, I was really aware that it's not that long ago, and, you know, that it's really raw, because Nick was your brother and your brother-in-law. So I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart to saying yes to being interviewed. You know, may the force continue to grow, and may it save many Nicks, many Nicks. And and thanks, Nick, for your final gift, even though that was not what everybody wanted. And I'm sure that if you could rewind time, that this is the gift that you didn't want to receive, that you didn't want to hold in the world, and yet it is what's here. So thank you, beautiful, loving, powerful men. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Giselle. Really appreciate having us on. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Giselle. Awesome. And appreciate your time.
Before our listeners go, there's an extra piece to this episode that I've been graciously given permission to include. So the background of that is we completed the interview and we continued talking, and the recording was still going. Afterwards, I thought to myself, wow, that piece that wasn't the interview was actually really powerful, and it just stayed with me. And then today, before I started editing this episode, I was speaking to Scott, and he was asking me how I felt the episode went. And I said, the interview went. And I said that I felt that it went very well, and that I felt that the vulnerability shared when the interview had finished was actually pretty special. And so Scott suggested that we keep that as part of the episode. I asked him to ask Paul for permission, and as I said, we've been graciously given that permission. So please stay tuned just for the next few minutes and hear more about Paul's experience from his vulnerable self. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
All good?
Yeah, all good.
That's a wrap.
How was that for you?
I got a bit emotional there for a while.
Yeah, I did.
Good.
I did.
I don't know if that was evident, but
Oh, you can feel it. There's an energy shift. Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, definitely got which was good. I didn't think I was going to go there with the gift thing, but I've been thinking about that, and it just came out, as you said. So that was pretty interesting. I just had a session with David before this, so I'm ready to go.
I was actually thinking I might even put David's details in the show notes. Who knows what might happen?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever. I mean,
Yeah, and that one's look, it's kind of hard. I find that question hard, and I'm glad Scotty you answered it because it was genuine. And the reason I say that is I haven't been there personally, so I actually find it hard to talk about mental health struggles for me. I have ups and downs, and sometimes it's shitty, and I've got people around me that are struggling that I'm trying to help and support. So it's just that I didn't know if my answer was appropriate to that question because I knew where you were trying to take it.
Yeah.
The thing for me is like Nick was 5.5 years older than me, and our life, you could basically lay it out on a train track, and I'm basically following behind him.
Yeah. And
that's the thing that freaks me out sometimes because I'm like, shit, like we got married at the same time. He went to the UK. I went to the UK. He had, we both had kids together. He did accounting at uni. I did accounting at uni. He joined Renew Track. I joined Renew Track. He stopped playing soccer at 51. I'm probably going to start. And, everything is the same. And so I'm just sitting there going, fuck, am I going to get this mental switch in my head at 52?
He's passed a different baton onto you. A different one. Yeah, he's passed a different baton onto you. And you've got more awareness now than what he had.
Yeah.
So you can't go down that road. You've got too much awareness now.
It's fundamentally changed and shifted for you.
When you asked the question, I actually didn't know how to answer that one because, I don't know.
But yeah, I just want to say, like, trust yourself, Paul, because you've got way too much awareness. Yeah. And the environment that you're in now with the foundation, there's just no way. You don't believe that story doesn't belong.
Right? So on my desk, so we always have this thing at work where we do challenges, and one challenge was send us something from the weekend, and we got this young guy who lives in the UK, and he had this picture, or he sent this video of him doing chin-ups on a chin-up bar with his kid on his back, like basically showing off how strong he is. So the next weekend, Nick and I were at Buckety's, and just as a joke, Nick went to reenact this guy as a bit of a payout to him. And one of the girls, she did a cartoon of the picture. And if you can see it, it's Nick pretending he's actually standing on the ground, right? And he's pretending to do chin-ups. So he's standing there, and I'm hanging on to his back. But the thing that really strikes me, that picture, is it looked, for me, I get Nick struggling and me there basically on his back, with the weight of his world on his back, and Nick struggling, he's red in the face, and he, can't deal with it. And I look at that picture every day, and it's, I don't know, it's just something that.
What are you saying there, mate? Can I ask?
I'm just saying the picture, I don't know what I'm saying, actually. I was looking at it through the conversation, and it was like Nick, that we all love and know, he's there, red in the face, struggling, and me just got it there on his back, not really being aware of what he's going through. Even though it was a piss take and it had nothing to do with that, when I look at the picture now, I look at it with a completely different lens going, shit, he's in trouble, he's struggling. What could we have done to help lift him up a bit more,
Yeah. But are you blaming yourself, the fact that you feel like you're on his back and not noticing?
I have. I wouldn't say blame myself. I don't know if that's the right word. Just more could I have done more and maybe saw the signs a bit better, or listened more, or helped more, or whatever, whatever it may be. I don't blame myself.
Good.
I think at the end of the day, you're accountable for what you do, right? And he's got to own that. Yeah.
I just wanted to check that you didn't blame yourself. That's why I asked.
Thanks, bud.
If you enjoyed this episode or previous episodes, I would so appreciate you sharing the love and letting your family, friends, and colleagues know about this podcast, because the only way that it's going to get out there is if we use word of mouth, the good old word of mouth. So I have my hands in appreciation for you, for those who have already been sharing the love. And should this part of the podcast inspire you to share amongst your network, I really appreciate you. Also, I've been saying that I am also returning to my first love, which is writing. So if you would like to receive me in your inbox every week, there is a link in the show notes where you'll be able to subscribe, and I look forward to writing to you. Have an incredible week. Thank you.